Now, speaking of different bands, you're currently in a band called Dagger. What makes Dagger different from your other work, and what projects have you been working on?
King Chi was mainly I mean, that band went through quite a lot of iterations because it was been around for 18 years and a lot of people came in and out. And so when we started that band, it was very much about the message, about, presenting hardcore, like just kind of being like the representation, the ambassadors of hardcore in Hong Kong mainly. And then, of course, it got taken over in China, whereas in King Lai Chi got much bigger in China. That's where that Godfather tag really came from, was
Hmm.
up in China. And they had this guy, this Pakistani guy, me, grew up in Hong Kong, speaks Cantonese and Mandarin fluently. In the last three records for King Lai Chi, we had an English version of it, and then we had an all Mandarin version of it. So I was learning both of it. So like it really got accepted big time up in China. But with that, I kind of unfortunately put myself in a box musically.
Hmm.
Because we were like the ambassadors and representing hardcore. So I was trying to represent like the more root sound of hardcore, like more punk rock, like the fast and in your face. And so like I just didn't realize how much of a box I'd put myself in, even though I didn't grow up listening to punk rock or hardcore. I grew up listening to metal, like that's what I
Hmm.
did. I was like a riff guy. I was all about the riffs, but like the last like 10 years of King Lychee's history, we were all about like, nope, straight ahead. Let's go. Let's keep it as simple as possible. Punch you in the face. You get the lyrics. You see us live. You totally get what we're all about. So like by the end of King Lychee ended, I think, around 2017. So maybe around 2016, I was like missing it. And like I'm a guitar player. Like I picked up the mic in King Lychee later, but
Hmm.
I was a guitar player. So I was just missing that vibe. And I was listening to a lot of like bands that have a little bit more of a metallic edge. And it was so weird because honestly, at that around that same point time, a lot of people were also missing the metallic hardcore sound of the 90s, like bands like Snapcase and Earth Crisis and Strife and stuff like that. And I was just getting back into all those bands, listening to a lot of Turmoil. That band Turmoil was a great band. And so I was picking up the guitar and started writing this stuff. And me and the drummer of King Ledge are really good friends. And I started just showing him demos. He's like, whoa, this is a lot more interesting.
A little different twist,
And I was
and
like, yeah. I was like, for example, like I was like, yeah, dude. I'm like, let's just like, we've got King Lychee going. Like we had no idea that band was going to end, but with Dagger, we were like, let's do something different. Let's just make it like no holds barred. Like whatever we want to throw, doom, sludge, whatever. Let's just throw it all in there. And honestly, that was the catalyst for Dagger, was to just be a little bit more musical, keep it heavy. Definitely the lyrical, we're still all about it, man. We just released a song called Yellow Helmets. It's protest in Hong Kong, pro democracy in Hong Kong. So the lyrically, it's still there, but musically, it's a lot more interesting.
now, speaking of Hong Kong, this sort of goes into the next question that I had. We have a lot of people in our community from around the world. And for our audience who has absolutely no idea what's going on in Hong Kong, um, can you explain sort of what the people in Hong Kong are protesting and what is the current status of this fight right now?
Hong Kong has got such a complex history. So anyone that has studied Hong Kong will probably know that this answer is so complicated. I mean, I can break it down specifically to the issue that started last year, but we have to like go way back and just understand the complexity that this city used to be a Chinese city, got taken over by England, it got taken over by Japan for a couple of years, it got given back to England, and then given back to China recently. So it's so complicated. And even living in Hong Kong, you'll notice that there's always been kind of two streams, two parallel universes. One universe is the expat. We call it the expat universe, the universe of like, a lot of the foreigners that come to Hong Kong that have been here for decades, man. I mean, they're as much as Hong Kong as anybody else. Then you got the local population, which is like 96%. And so that 96% lives in parallel universes, right? So that's been such a complicated study of this city, the complex nature of it. So what made it even more complicated was in 97 when we got returned to China. And so when we got returned to China, there's all sorts of fears and just concerns about where Hong Kong is and all the freedoms that we enjoy and all the freedoms that we want to maintain for future generations. So all the issues that kind of just exploded last year was because this stuff has just been bubbling under the surface and no one's really been addressing it, you know? So what we've been seeing in the past 22 years of Hong Kong's existence is a downward trajectory of our rights and our freedoms and things being taken away. You know, we do have a constitution called the Basic Law in Hong Kong, which does preserve all of these rights: freedom of speech, assembly, press. All of these things are in the Basic Law, but we've seen our Hong Kong government, which is really a bunch of puppets. I mean, if there's any example of puppets, it's the Hong Kong government, because what we've learned over the past few years is the Hong Kong government has no independent measure or way to make decisions for Hong Kong. What they always do is they have to go back to Beijing and get prior approval. That's why we've seen Hong Kong's government so slow to react to things, where the Hong Kong people are reacting faster. Government is. So last year, what happened was the government wanted to introduce an extradition law, which is crazy, because in Hong Kong we know how there is no judicial process or due process in China in their judicial system. In the Chinese penal system or judicial system, the CCP government rules. They have final say. So there is no independence between government and the judiciary. In Hong Kong, we do have that, you know? So we were like, wait, so you want to introduce, this is the Hong Kong government wants to introduce an extradition law that if someone from Hong Kong does something bad in China or whatever, they're allowed to be taken away from Hong Kong and brought to China to go through the Chinese judicial system. We lost our minds. We're like, how can you do that? You cannot sell our city out. You can't sell our people out. We have freedom of speech and assembly and expression, and Hong Kong people are so used to that. Like, you could scroll through a Hong Kong like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. You're like, God damn, are you sure you want to be saying the stuff you're saying? And we're like, especially now, yes, we're going to say as much as we want to say, go as far as we can, because what's coming down the pike is not cool. And we're getting little glimpses of it now. And so last year, when that happened was, of course, Hong Kong people got obsessed and got really pissed. And so 1 million people took to the streets. You know, I brought my daughter, brought my wife. We all went. Like, I've been going to protest forever, but there was something very special about that one. That was something that really united Hong Kong. And so with 1 million people on the streets, imagine we have 7 million people total. So 1 million of us were on the streets, you know, saying that this is not something we want. We don't want this. Take this off the table. Let's start the conversation again. Explain this through the process or whatever. The government ignored it. And of course, they were going to ignore it. The weekend after, 2 million people were on the streets. The government ignored it again. And then right from there on, what happened, which is completely going to go down in history, is that the young youth of Hong Kong, who usually are known to be really apathetic, not politically savvy at all, but something happened the summer of last year where the youth were done. They were over it. They were like, all of you old fucking people who kept going on these protests, marching on these streets, nothing has ever happened, and now it's our future that you've messed with. It's our future. You're going to be dead and gone, and we're going to be stuck with no freedoms, not being able to access Facebook or YouTube or WhatsApp or Instagram like people up in China. So what they did was they went ballistic, right? They went and they started to attack things, you know, set fire to things that I mean, I'm 43. I have never seen that happen in Hong Kong. And the second thing that was really amazing because of that was, I was like, oh man, they're going this route, this violent route. They're going to lose the support of like the most modern Hong Kongers ever, because Hong Kong people usually are very rational, very pragmatic. But the strangest thing happened. All the Hong Kong people were clapping for them.
Wow.
Dude, it was like, I'm like, what is going on? Like, I could not believe it. So even to this day, those protesters we call them the frontline protesters. If they're running through a protest, the protest will break up, like the Red Sea, parting of the Red Sea, to give space to run to the front line. Because what those guys are doing, they're going to the front line to give everybody else. So those guys in the front line will race right up to the police line, right up to the right police who've got tear gas, shotguns, everything, right up to the front line. So the rest of us have time to escape.
Wow. I mean,
So it's been nuts. It's been nuts. It's really been crazy because we also saw a different side to the police that we've never seen before either. You know, like the police has always known, like in Asia, as Asia's finest. They've always been very neutral in protests in the past. I've always seen them kind of stand on the periphery and guide everybody. They're the ones that would stop traffic for us to walk and make sure we're safe. Since last summer, we've seen them side with the pro-government, the pro-CCP people, and actually battle, beat up people, shoot people, like pound people on the ground, blood squirting everywhere. They don't care. It's been a shock, such a shock. And people are like, oh, you know, how are you guys handling the virus? I'm like, the virus is nothing compared to what's been going on for the past 9 months.